and welcome to the next episode of DDR, a podcast all about your favorite Drow, Drizzt Do'Urden. My name is Justin, and in this episode, we'll be diving deep into part 5 of Sojourn, titled Sojourn, discussing all of our favorite plot points, characters, and more.
And my name is Jeffrey. One of the things that we're going to do each episode is take a look at how part of this book, or how this part of the book, compares to some of the things that you'd find inside the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Me and Justin, pretty big fans of tabletop role-playing games, so we'll do our best to show you how these worlds kind of cross over.
Following along with the show is easy. Just grab a copy of the book, read the next part of the book, and tune in every week. But remember, we want to hear your thoughts too. You can share your dim lights with us at drizzdoneright@gmail.com.
And to stress, we want to hear your side of these books.
Absolutely.
What you guys think of them, how you guys think that they integrate, all of these things. If you want, you can always come on out to the Drizzt. The invitation is inside of the episode link that you can find on side of the description of the episode. See, I did that in there all together. I'm making hand motions for those of you who watch the YouTube video, because if you got the video, might as well give you movement, right? Anyhow, right? The Discord is, if you raise an interesting point, we're going to bring you up on the show. We're getting here to the end of book 3. The first trilogy is fun. It's a little milestone that we've reached, and we wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for taking this journey with us. I encourage you all to join this Discord, take part in the discussion, shoot us an email, leave us your thoughts. We really do enjoy the interactions with you, the fans, who help make this world what it is for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Jeffrey, here we are. What? How long since we started? I mean, this is the last part of the third book. When did we start? Was that the beginning of the year last year?
Last year. Yes, because
okay.
we originally started with a different format of just doing that every episode as the chapter, which took much longer.
It took a lot longer, but then if you look at it the way that we approached book 3, it took probably just as long.
Yes, well, that part of that is user error. I had things come up, and it just took time.
You and I both, not just you, right? I mean, again, as I've been saying, like each episode, it's like we're gonna be releasing these, and it's gonna be so just broken up into chunks. I mean,
for those of you who've been there for day one, we apologize for the time. But for those of you who are just catching this and going side to side, you don't notice any lapse in judgment. Hopefully, you guys are lapse in judgment, lapse in time. So hopefully, you're just enjoying that from episode to episode, right?
Absolutely, yeah. All right. Well, anything new? Anything new, Jeffrey? Any cool?
I mean, just
nothing new.
Slinging the world of making coffee. Just been watching movies, hanging out, just doing life.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, coffee's great. Movie's great. I mean, I just have to say a dim light for me within the past, since the last episode that we recorded, went down to Baltimore to see a show.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you know anything about that.
I did attend it with you. For some reason, it just not across my mind when you say did anything come up, because I knew you knew that.
No, we for those listening, we went and saw Clue. What was the name of the theater there? You can do a shout out for the theater. It's Hippo something, right? It was Hippo something.
The Hippodrome.
The Hippodrome. And how could you forget Hippo, right? Hippo in the name.
It's a pretty nice little theater, It had a lot of seats inside it. It was definitely bigger than I thought it was.
Oh man, they packed you in. They packed you in though. There were a lot of people there.
But it was a high quality performance. It's not Broadway.
Oh yeah.
But it is it's definitely professional theater.
Yeah, I mean it was definitely professional theater. I mean, I've never been to a Broadway show, so I don't know. But I mean the scenes did we say what we actually went to see? Did I say what
you said? Clue. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. We went to see Clue, and it was wonderful. I just wanted to make sure that was out there, or else we're dancing around talking about this wonderful play, and I was like, never actually said what it was.
It is my wife's favorite movie of all time, with Tim Curry.
It's a good one, yeah.
She's watched it so many times. So it was fun to get together and go see that. Big patron of the live arts. Think that everybody should always go out and see. It's just something different about being part of a crowd, and having been on stage in a very community theater kind of way, it's that back and forth where like if you're in the crowd having a great time and you gasp and you laugh and you
Right.
cheer,
Yeah.
the people on stage they feed on that. You know what I mean? Because to them
Yeah.
that's
Right.
everything. They practice these lines 100,000 times, right?
Yeah.
And they think they're gonna get a laugh here, but they get it over there, and it's like you become part of an iconic once in a lifetime performance that's never going to be the same because
I
you're
know.
never get the same audience. So it's like just
Right.
being there in that moment. It's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. No, and I wish that was something I got more into when I was in high school.
Yeah.
But you
Oh,
look at
me
the
too. I
theater
didn't
kids.
do
Right,
anything with
well,
theater.
that's what I mean. And like, I did a couple little things here and there with different groups, but nothing real
No,
serious. And
it's all for me
um,
for Elizabeth. I used to tell her, I was like, one day if anybody had to open tryouts or whatever, I would walk in and try out for a play. Like I don't even care. Look, sure enough, one day she literally sends me a link to a community website of where we were living down in St. Mary's County, and it
uh-huh,
said open tryouts for the man who came to dinner. I was like, sure, why not? Like I always say it. You gave me a link. I'm just gonna go in there and try it,
nice.
and went through it all, and it was fun just being able to get up there and try it because look, it's community
Right.
theater. Nobody's expecting anything from you. You know what I mean? It's just about
Gotcha.
going up
Yeah.
there and doing it,
Right.
and it's cool. I highly recommend everybody if you can't get up on stage, be a part of stage. You know what I mean? Help at the tickets,
That's a
help at
good
the
point.
box office. Yeah, just be part of the stage setup. It's really a fun and rewarding experience to be part
Yeah.
of a show.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that would definitely be part of my issue with it is I'm not huge on standing up in front of people, me hosting a podcast, right?
Yeah,
Um,
irony, sir.
but I mean, like, people aren't right here, right in front of me right now.
Not yet.
Um,
Someday when we get to the live performances.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe eventually. I doubt it with our schedules. All right. Well, yeah, definitely something that I wish I would have gotten into, but oh well.
Speaking of getting
Um,
into, that's a good way to segue too.
let's go ahead and jump start this show, do one or the other. We'll jump right into the insight check. Let's begin the show by rolling an insight check on Drizzt's letter here at the beginning of part 5 of Sojourn. So, as I said earlier, this title of this letter is very fitting. It's titled Sojourn, which of course is also the title of our book. So
When
that's
you
pretty
said
easy to
that, I was
remember.
like, oh no, you messed it up. Like I had to look at the script and be like, wait a minute, what are you doing? You're reading the same thing twice. Nope, you're right. You're right.
So within this letter, Drizzt is reflecting on his first hike into Mushi's Grove, right? As he is now leaving Mushi's Grove. And how different are these two instances from each other?
Wow.
Well,
It's kind of
on the
cool if you think about
surface,
that. I'm jumping in real quick. You remember when we first started this, we didn't know what a mushi was, and we
right,
speculated what is
right.
a mushi. And here Drizzt is reflecting on his time all the way back at the beginning at just kind of a neat
Yeah,
moment. Go
yep.
ahead.
So on the surface, which they might not seem very different, the two situations, right? Initially, Drizzt is coming in not knowing exactly what he's looking for. Besides, he's looking for a sense of belonging, right? And when Drizzt is leaving, the same thing, really. He's also searching for this same sense of belonging. He seemed to have it there while Montolia was alive and everything, but now that he's passed, um, he's got to go searching for belonging. Of course, there are a few other differences within Drizzt during his hike out of the grove, from like compared to the first time. Drizzt is now an established ranger with a decent amount of combat experience, considering they just fended off all those orcs not that long ago. Not only that, but he now knows the name of his heart. That is, Drizzt has been following his heart, and his heart's values align pretty well with the deity Mieliki, the Lady of the Forest, which I just want to say real quick. I say Mieliki just because that's how my audiobook pronounces it.
No, that's excellent because every time I read it, I go straight to the Christmas Vacation song, where it's like
Oh
"Me
my
leaky,
gosh.
leaky, leaky, it's the way to be." Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm glad that you have an alternate pronunciation because in my that's all I can see when I read that.
Jeffrey, I'm not
Yep.
going to lie. That song was
Hmm.
stuck in my head all day today because of Mialiki.
Excellent. Excellent.
But when I looked up Mialiki on the Forgotten Realms wiki, its suggested pronunciation was Maeliki.
Hmm.
Maeliki. Which, I mean, oh, anyway.
Potato. It's close. I like
Same
it. I
thing.
like it.
It's the same person, right? Uh, so then, for the next who knows how long, Mialiki gave Drizzt the courage to walk up to a bunch of random villages and cities. He's trying to find a place that would take him in. Drizzt could only hope for an acceptance like he received in Blingdenstone with the gnomes, one where he would be under careful watch until he won the trust of the townsfolk. But let's not forget about how the hunter would emerge from the inside of Drizzt, right? And scare all those little children around. But I guess the hunter has been taken care of. The hunter's out of the
Way to
picture,
go,
right?
Anakin.
Drizzt did not find acceptance into any of these towns that he was visiting, and for some of these towns even went as far as to chase Drizzt off, trying to kill him. So by the end of the letter, Drizzt starts to fantasize of a world where a person's character would outweigh the color of their skin and their reputation, and the reputation of their heritage. And I really liked that quote. And judging from all of the other 538 people, literally 538 people that underlined that quote on Amazon Kindle, it's obviously a popular quote. My first thought about Drizzt fantasizing of this world where everyone is accepted for who they are, I was like, he's fantasizing about our world. And then I'm like, hold on. After thinking about it for like a
Yeah.
split second, I was like, nah, he's thinking about a totally different world altogether. And I know we already talked about racism on this podcast. Racism is a big thing in the D&D world, right? It's an unfortunate thing that we have to live with. I mean, we don't have to live with it, but I mean, it's I don't want to say it's not going anywhere, but there's just like people out there that they're not getting rid of it, right? And so we have to just continue pushing through with this. And what are we gonna do? So yeah, it's an unfortunate thing, but I feel like Salvatore does a real good job relaying the hurt that is caused by it. For 3 books now, all we've seen is hatred for the Drow and from the other races, right? Yet Drizzt does not represent his kind in any way, with the exception of the color of his skin. So what's he supposed to do about that? I mean, there's not much he can do about it. I guess in a magical world, he could cast polymorph on himself.
Yeah, but I mean, then unfortunately, he would have to be doing magic to hide himself, right? And that's
Well,
kind of
and
like
he's
a self-defeating thing there, right?
yeah, and he's not being true to himself,
Right, right.
by doing that.
No,
And
I think you put that beautifully because it is a very extremely sensitive topic, right? And
right.
I think that the way Salvatore does this inside of the fantasy realm gives him a freedom that he uses to paint with such tact when it comes to using the words and how he goes
Yeah.
upon, the feelings and putting you in the position and the shoes of,
Right.
what it's like to look at an orc from a bugbear or if a drow from, just the different things that you go through in there. And it really does. And we'll get to it when I do my dim light, right? Put you in the eyes of things that you just think you're going to hate or you're
Mm-hmm.
going to not like, whatever. And then he does that. He just switches it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, but I could see myself as that. That does hurt the
Right.
feelings, right in the heartstrings.
Yep. Totally.
R.I.P.
Absolutely.
Clacker, giant, giant petch. No, no, the giant the hook hard. Not the petch was small when he was
Right. Yeah,
skinny.
that's true. Yeah. The giant patch, the small
But no,
patch.
that was beautifully put. It was beautifully put. How about we go and get to the Drizzt of it? So this is the Drizzt of it. It's the part of the show where we take a look at the book and give you the Drizzt of it. Chapter 20, titled Years and Miles. We find ourselves in perhaps one of the most familiar settings that you're going to find inside of a D&D campaign, right? It's the inside of a tavern. The Harvest Inn in Westbridge, to be exact. And in the corner is a very familiar figure, covered in scars, weary from the years that have passed since we've last seen him. But the dog on the floor lets us know that it's Roddy McGristle who sits behind the cow. The buzz in the tavern found its way to his table as talk of dark elves piqued his interest. Roddy soaked in the attention of the people around him as they recognized him, his scars proving that his encounters with a dark elf were not just rumors. A heavy man was recalling his encounter with a dark elf, and he come upon while camping, and Roddy just nodded along, believing the story and lending his credence. Roddy started to feel the man hanging on his words, almost like the good old days. The heavy man mentioned seeing a set of purple eyes, and suddenly Roddy's focus was locked in. He knew of a dark elf with lavender eyes. That elf was responsible for his scars, for the death of his dog, for his disgrace.
Just to be fair, I think it was more the tree that caused the scars.
No,
But the death
Roddy
of
would tell you every chance he gets.
Now the death of his dog, I believe, yeah, Drizzt did kill his dog, but it was the tree I feel like was actually Roddy's fault. But anyway.
Roddy grabbed that man roughly, and he demanded the location where he had last seen that drow. At the mention of the Weeping Friars, the crowd all groaned. Oh. This meant, though, that Roddy knew the way they would travel. They always went to Mirabar through the tunnel route. And Roddy was gone before anybody had noticed, which has got to be a feat because he's a big, big man.
Yeah,
6 years had passed, right? His stealth is it's a high modifier.
He rolled an at 20.
6 years had passed. This was Drizzt's 7th winter since coming to the surface, but the chill on the surface still made him uncomfortable. The Weeping Friars kept their distance, but they were happy for his company. In his own way, I guess Drizzt was kind of happy for theirs, too. Despite their eccentricities, they accepted him after he had been turned away time and time again from every village he'd approached. Despite their awkward arrangement.
That's a great way to put it, an awkward arrangement. I was just about to say how, like, it was just a very interesting way that they met up. It was just kind of like, Drizzt was just like, hey, you're not going to reject me, so I'm just going to start following you. It's what it sounded like.
And it's like, well, I mean, they're all in for suffering. So what is it, right? At the end of the day, is the drow going to bring bad luck? Great,
right,
excellent. It's a weird with a mutually parasitic relationship.
Yeah.
Drizzt realized that his place was not going to be with the Weeping Friars after their journey to Mirabar. He would leave and once again try to find a place, to find a home, someplace like Mushi's Grove. Chapter 21 is called Hephaestus?
Hephaestus is how my audiobook called it.
Hephaestus. I'm like
Hephaestus. I don't know.
I think that AE is going to be a Estes. I like it.
Yeah.
Along the road to Mirabar, and hot on the trail of Drizzt, dragons, and the Weeping Friars, which ironically sounds like the type of a rock band, right? Drizzt and the Weeping Friars.
Absolutely.
I'd totally show up to see them. We find Tephanis. Roddy had sent him to find Drizzt and lead him back into a fight, but Tephanis had grown tired of finding new masters, and he had a devious plan all of his own set up for the tunnel ahead. Drizzt and his band of not-so-merry men came upon an intersection with a portcullis raised, a pitch-black entrance, unlike the torch-lit main tunnel. Just weird pacing in that sentence. Brother Jenkins immediately screamed out for Hephaestus. The ultimate suffering, and he struggled to run toward the dark, only to be restrained by his fellow friars. Turned out that Hephaestus was an old red dragon that had lived in the caves of Mirabar for as long as anyone could remember. Although that wasn't his real name, just one that they used for it. The town put up with the dragon because, well, it was fat and lazy. Wasn't much hope for pillaging, and it could even be actually troubled to do some smelting if the price was right. Nothing can separate metal like a red dragon's breath. A small cry for help stopped the group. Drizzt and the group cautiously moved forward, and this allowed Tephanis to spring his trap as they zipped in and slammed the door shut and then locked it behind them and zipped back out, trapping them in the dragon's lair.
That's terrifying.
A quick assessment of the situation led Drizzt to realize they only had one way out, much to the dismay of the Weeping Friars. That way will lead past the dragon. Well, I guess much to the dismay of all the Weeping Friars, except Brother Jenkins. Drizzt perused the book of dragon lore that he had taken from Mushi's Grove and found an entry about the venerable Red who lived west of Mirabar. Hephaestus was a name from some obscure god of blacksmithing. The entry confirmed the dragon was lazy and somewhat stupid, as well as overly proud. It speaks common tongue, but lacked suspicious insight that Reds were notorious for.
So, I must say, Drizzt was extremely lucky that he picked up that one tome.
Yeah.
Or like, how many tomes did he bring with him, and why did he bring that one?
Well, I feel like he took probably like at least a satchel of books, right? Because I feel like at
Yeah.
one point, he's reading through many books with candles and everything else. So he's got to have several. And I imagine he took things that, again, adventuring kind of calls out to him. That's my best guess. Drizzt realized that the dragon's vanity could be a key weakness, and he went through several candles while delving through the book in search of information that could help. Sketch of a black dragon confused Brother Matthias as Drizzt explained the beginnings of an idea.
Mergen,
Mergendevendescent.
Merg. No,
Go
you
ahead.
got it. You got it.
Mergendeven Ascender? Mergendeven
Mergen Devinis.
Asander?
Mergen Devinisander.
Mergendevenasander was a black
There we
dragon
go.
who has purple eyes. Drizzt made his way to the lair of the red and had his breath taken away. Of all the wonders he had seen, none would outdo the splendor of the riches that were splayed out before him. This was the type of setting where songs were sung by bards of adventurers and obstacles that they would overcome. The dragon sat between two large stacks of gold, his immense gold and red scaled tail swishing gold around itself in pools. Pictures could not do a dragon justice. And of all the dragons, the huge reds were perhaps the most imposing. Thankfully, this one was dozing. Its rhythmically thunder-like breathing was a dead giveaway. Love that description, thunder-like
Mm-hmm.
breathing. Drizzt drew the attention of the red and was surprised by how nimble this god thing Hephaestus was. The massive eyes were like twin beams of damnation. Drizzt cried out a greeting, and Hephaestus was confused. Why would a dark elf have heard of him? Why would a dark elf seek them out? It was Drizzt's turn to look confused. Drow? No, not I. He looked at himself and nodded. I often forget this mantle I wear. Magnificent, Drizzt began to weave a tale of how an old black dragon, Mergen Devensander of Cholt, had come to become trapped. He played to the vanity in Hephaestus, causing the red to gloat and become prideful. The flame that stole forth into the air out of its mouth took the very breath from Drizzt's lungs, causing the red to feel superior. Drizzt was offered the opportunity to leave with his life, but instead he chose to lean further into it. Begged him, eat me! Eat me! Just, you know what, if you're not going to change me back, eat me. He challenged the red to dispel the magic that had cursed him, for surely the red was mighty enough to do it, and what he wasn't afraid of being seen inferior to a human wizard, was he? Surely not, right? So it's a big red dragon. Hephaestus was predictably insulted, rose to the challenge. Drizzt couldn't wait until he was ready. He needed to speed things up. He can't wait for tomorrow to come. He had to have it happen now. So Drizzt challenged the red to breathe fire even longer, and he used that distraction to signal the monks to move across the layer, taking advantage of the fact that he noticed Hephaestus closed his eyes when he breathed fire.
Mm-hmm.
Except the same pride that caused the red to respond to Drizzt's jabs and challenges also caused that red to peek while melting the stone in hopes of catching the display of wonder on Drizzt's face. However, what he did notice was the shadows of 5 fleeing figures from the treasure room. The red roared at the intruders, and Drizzt scrambled atop the dragon in self-defense, throwing dirt in its eye, and narrowly avoiding being crushed on the ceiling as the red threw its head up and smashed its skull off the roof, knocking down stones that also then would fall onto Hephaestus. The red's breath melted a large pile of gold, which actually served to further enrage the red as he was melting his own gold. Drizzt called out as he was running, "Steal the gold, come back, I'm going to take his attention," as a distraction as he ran away.
Right. Yep.
Suddenly the dragon was torn between eating Drizzt or guarding for another attack, and ultimately settled on promising to thoroughly eat the next merchant party that made its way through. It's a lot of work to get all the way, and it is fat and lazy after all.
Yeah, that's true. Almost like the Red Dragon in the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
I just watched that last night, as a matter of fact, so I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Oh, that scene was hilarious.
Chapter 22, Homeward Bound. The friars were overjoyed as they reached the safety of the outside. Well, most of them, not Brother Jenkins, but we'll get to that. Thanks to Drizzt, who came out with emptied his pockets of a few treasures and gave it to the friars because he had no need for those treasures. He was set to move on to Ten Towns. It's that place that Matthias had mentioned before, the land of rogues, where a rogue might find his own place. The friars, they all tried to talk him out of it, but Drizzt reasoned that ultimately any place would pose similar dangers, and he had made his mind up that he's going to try this one. The next morning, most of the friars showed up with a horse to see him off, but, Brother Jenkins, he had to be tied up because it turns out that he kept trying to run back to Festus the dragon so he could be punished. The Weeping Friars are definitely a very different breed.
So I must say, the first time I was reading this,
Yeah.
Jenkins kept trying to run into the dragon's lair,
Leroy!
Right?
Yep.
Leroy Jenkins, right?
Yep.
I was like, oh my gosh, he referenced the World of Warcraft guy, and I'm like, hold on, this
Spelled
came
different.
out. This
Yep.
came, yeah, well, yeah, for one, that's Leroy Jenkins with an E, and this is Jenkins with an
Yep.
A. And also, World of Warcraft wouldn't come out for another, 13 years or something?
Look, Simpsons foretold a prophecy. So did R.A. Salvatore, sir. From a ledge above, Roddy, McGristle, and Tyrannus watched the Weeping Friars and Drizzt begin to part ways. Tyrannus cried out loudly about the dragon and realized that McGristle probably knew exactly what he did to the travelers to try and rob him of his revenge on the Drow. Roddy shrugged it off and told him, get in the sack. They're going to go after the Drow. That's what mattered. Soon as Tyrannus was in the sack, Roddy slammed it repeatedly into a wall until a wet spot appeared and the quickling had stopped moving. Roddy was off to go make the Weeping Friars talk. Took about an hour, but Roddy was on the trail of the Drow, and the Weeping Friars had received more suffering at his hands than they bargained for. Back to Drizzt, off in the distance, 3 lakes could be seen dominating the background with the peak of Kelvin's Cairn raising 1,000 feet above the broken plain. I'd like to pause for a moment because we just interacted with Kelvin's Cairn in our own D&D campaign just recently.
We did.
With the slaying of a mammoth. That was totally meant to be fought and beaten.
Well, that was different. Kelvin's Cairn was the place where we retrieved the what was it? We did like 3 quests already. What was it, like iron or something?
Oh, was the ingot for the dwarves?
Yeah, the ingots for the dwarves, yeah. And then
I just knew it was the location we traveled past.
The polar bears, the goblins that were being pulled by the polar bears. That was that, yeah.
So I found a kind of, a little fanboy moment where I was like, oh, Kelvin's Cairn. I see we were there.
Jeffrey, get ready for it because we're going to go into book 4 here, which was the first book, right? The Crystal Shard, his first book that he wrote. And
spoiler alert, I am already into that book. Yes.
And our campaign is set in Icewind Dale, so Yep, we're going to get a lot of that.
So viewing the cities from a distance, Drizzt considered trying one of the smaller cities, but he ended up making his way to the merchant hub of Bryn Shander, where a guard questioned him at the gate. This dance had become one that Drizzt wearily knew the steps of as he saw the shock in their faces when his hood came down. Spokesman Cassius was sent for and soon arrived to meet with Drizzt and question his motives for visiting 10 towns. The spokesman tried to push Drizzt off to one of the smaller towns, but Drizzt was too weary to let it play out. Who will welcome a Drow? Everyone who has forsaken his people, even one who has forsaken his people and their ways and desires nothing more than peace. Spokesman Cassius sympathized, but what could he do? This made me think of Blingdenstone with the king, where he was like, look, I'd love to let you stay, but what can I do, right? It's like a repeated theme.
Yeah, absolutely.
10 Towns was no place for a wandering Drow, but as Drizzt told his story, a compromise appeared, and Cassius proposed that Drizzt live on the outskirts of the wild, scouting the mountains' northern slopes and protecting everyone from danger. This could earn him a meager place among them. The price was high for such a small return, but what type of home could Drizzt expect to find if he was let in among the people of 10 Towns? The reputation of his people carried a heavier weight than his own individual accomplishments. For now. Drizzt made his way around his new home atop the pile of rocks in the tundra. He took care to avoid any guards set by the dwarves that he had shared the region with. Drizzt had actually only met dwarves once before, and they had run him off without any hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
Drizzt looked over at Ten Towns and couldn't help but feel some sort of affinity for the location. Even though he'd only been there a day, he was envisioning this place as his place. As a grumbling voice passed by, slamming its helmet onto the stone and yelling at the shadows as Drizzt remained hidden. Dwarves seem strange indeed. And
Right.
I
He
love
was
that
like,
because I know who that is, right? We all know who that
right.
is,
Yep.
most of our
Yep.
listeners. And it's just like once that moment hit, I was like, oh, you know it's
Yeah.
coming.
He's like, what? He was like hitting his head against the cliffside or a rock to get his helmet on straight
Yeah.
or something.
Instead
Such
of
a
straightening
dwarf
it by
thing to do.
hand, just slam
Right.
it, smacking his head.
Oh man, that's
So then we
great.
get into chapter 23. It's a memory come to life. A young girl named Caddybree watched the season's first snow fall in Icewind Dale. Her adopted father, Bruner, grumbled behind her. Bruner was 9 parts bluster and 1 part grouch, but his soft spot was endless when it came to Caddybree. A raiding party had killed her parents when she was only a toddler, and Bruner had taken her in as his own. Caddybree made her way outside to enjoy one of the last times she could see the sun until the winter season ended. Bruner worried about something prowling around the area, but she was no stranger to the dangers of the area. She'd been raised among the dwarves. Caddybree runs into Guinevere while out on the trail, and fearlessly she defends herself as she notices, though, a figure smoothly making its way towards her, and dismisses the Black Panther. The figure does, not Caddybree.
Cadbury was so fearless. She's just like, you
Yeah,
can
no,
go
she did
now.
not dismiss the panther. As Drizzt came down upon her, he was struck by the fact that she was about the same age as the Thistledowns at the farm. She had that same joyful spark in her eyes that he had seen in the surface elves all those years ago on his first raid. But before he could speak a word of greeting, she was gone. A few months would go by, and when the weather breaks, Bruner gets ready to go out on a trade run, and Caddybree wants a chance to investigate the stranger and his panther. The panther found her before she realized it was close by. She called out, remembering the name that the stranger had used. Drizzt popped up behind her and she slowly turned to meet him. He was caught off guard by her openness, her lack of judgment, and he told her that he means her no harm. Introductions were made, and she began to familiarize him with the area and the dwarves. She was defiant and bold. She had come to find him, and now she wondered what was next. Her very presence seemed to banish the very thought of negativity from his mind. He was unable to remember his darker memories while her bubbling energy poured forth, and he was relieved to find out that the dwarves were to be considered good folk. I thought that's interesting because, again, he's only ever has his own point of view to look at it through. So he doesn't, he just thinks all dwarves must be like the dwarves he ran into. As we've seen time and
Oh,
time
that's a
again
good
where he had
point.
been lied to, this is
Right.
where his own preconceived notions, like just his own small sample size, leads to him to judge the larger group, right? Because he had only seen
So,
a few dwarves. He thinks all dwarves must be
right.
mean and hate Drow, which
Right.
most of them do probably hate Drow.
Probably. I mean, and that's how he would have been taught too. Not that he really accepted all the teachings that the Drow taught him, right? But um, yeah, all the
Yeah.
dwarves are evil according to the Drow. So why would he think otherwise? But yeah.
The conversation between Drizzt and Caddybree went on, and the time slipped away, and it was time for her to leave because the journey was dangerous. The journey back home was pretty dangerous, and they made a deal to meet during the next thaw. She returned, light on her feet, but the dark expression on her father's face stole the mood from the room. He told her that she was forbidden to travel to the mountains. There was a dark elf in the area. During the next thaw, she kept her words and didn't set foot in the mountains. But calling out from the surrounding trails, she was able to get the attention of the hunter and his cat as they shared stories and a picnic lunch that Caddybree had packed. Thought that was an interesting little workaround.
Yeah, yeah.
Chapter
that
24. Okay.
Nah, I was just gonna say a little offshoot. That's following directions, just like what do you call it? Just like I don't know if have you ever watched the show Taskmasters?
No.
It's a British game show, and they're given an envelope with directions on it of a task that they have to do, and they, as long as they follow the directions, they can just like do it however they want. Okay, as long as they follow the directions. And so like it'll be something ridiculous like make this ball go into that bucket from the furthest distance possible. Like, make it travel the furthest distance possible before landing in the bucket. And everyone's like, oh, I will throw it into the bucket from the furthest point possible. Other people will take the bucket and the ball and they'll drive as far as they can
Oh,
and
okay.
then
Yeah,
put the
yeah.
ball in the bucket. They're following the directions as they were stated.
Yep.
But
I
it's
just recently saw like a TikTok montage of a guy who bends things with his hands, and he takes money challenges, like, rip a phone book in half. And one was put this nail in a tree because he would grab a nail and drive it into things. So then he grabs the
wow.
nail and he sets it in the tree. Put the nail in the tree. He just sets it
Oh.
in the tree, like on a little, right next to the
Ah.
limbs. I was like, oh, similar thing.
Nice.
So, chapter 24 is called Revelations. We find ourselves following Bruner along the slopes of Kelvin's cairn, with his axe in one hand and the shield with the foaming mug standard of clan battle hammer in the other. We find Bruner in a wonderfully cheery mood as he stops for a rest and stumbles upon a polar worm. The worm had a snake-like body that was about 40 feet long, lots of legs and some leathery wings that helped the front half rear up menacingly when it wanted to strike. The battle raged on as the worm sought to use its size to crush the smaller foe, and Bruner used every tactic and trick that he could to level the playing field. I say that he was in a cheery mood sarcastically for those who are listening, because he was definitely grumbling and muttering oaths. It's kind of what he does.
Yep.
Gore leaked from the worm as Bruner's notched battle axe found its way home a few times, and Bruner showed a few bruises and burns from the polar worm as they squared off again. The worm darted in to strike, and Bruner struck back, removing a tooth, but as he did, his leg buckled and the worm caught him, tossed him far to the side, and charged in to finish him off. Drizzt was alerted to commotion in the area by Gwen as he drew his scimitars and ran down to go fight the worm. He arrived to the scene as Bruner turned the tide of the battle and quite literally split the worm's face in two. Dwarf and Drow locked eyes amid the carnage, and Bruner beckoned him on for battle. This was like some Ninja Gaiden stuff to me, like at the end of the
Oh
first
yeah.
game where he looks across the field and sees that other bad guy. Anywho, Drizzt calmly dismissed Guinevere, and Bruner stared down at Drizzt. He spat challenges at him and mocked him, and Drizzt was overwhelmed and being perceived as the bad guy yet again. So he spun his scimitars back into the sheaths and, well, he walked away. When Bruner arrived back to his clan, he told them of the Dark Elf, and Catti perked up at the mention of Drizzt. Then Bruner noticed the recognition in her eyes. He forbid her from going near the mountains, not just in the mountains. Spokesman Cassius had given Drizzt the mountains, so let him have it. No one is to go near it. As the battle lust had faded from within him, Bruner couldn't help but play the events over and over in his mind and wonder, the Drow didn't come down to fight him, but surely it hadn't come down to help him either, right? A few days later saw a visitor come to Bruner's realm. Roddy McGristle had followed the Drow to Icewind Dale and was hot on his trail, even name-dropping spokesman Cassius as the person who had pointed him this way in his search. Catti sat nearby, and her nervous motions betrayed Bruner's poker face as Roddy fished for information, confirming to the hunter that Drizzt was in the area. Bruner stonewalled Roddy with jokes and quick retorts, determined not to be drawn into this conflict that he had no part in. Roddy told the story about the farm family in Maldabar, and Bruner took offense that the tale scared his daughter. Roddy knew that the aid would be hard to come by, but he begged for it anyway and was turned away by Bruner. Roddy began to let his anger get the best of him, and as his words began to turn to insult, Bruner leapt from his throne and came toward the larger man, growling his intent and suggesting that he may actually want to eat Roddy's remaining dog. Bruner turned the disgusting man out of his halls and left the matter up to fate to decide, despite the cries of Catti for him to intervene. It simply wasn't his problem. Catti fled in a tantrum with no real direction until she found herself standing near the boundaries of Drizzt's new home. She realized she had not come here to warn him, but actually for her own peace of mind. She just had to know what had happened to the family at Maldabar. And when Drizzt showed up, he recounted the tale as best that he could. Catti told him, though, that she had heard a different tale from McGristle, who showed up today. And alarm bells rang in Drizzt's head at the mention of McGristle, because he had forgotten all about the
Yeah.
man, left him in the past, and suddenly found himself to be overwhelmed by his own past yet again. Catti worried for Drizzt with the large hunter nearby. Drizzt knew he'd have to fight the man, but was determined to at least put it off for a little longer. This barren wasteland suddenly no longer felt much like home to him at all. Chapter 25, Dwarven Banter. On her way back home, Catti-brie was pounced upon by Roddy and his dog. He interrogated her about the Drow, knowing that she had come to see him. Her defiance earned his scorn, and his leering threat that things between them could turn physical in a manner that went beyond violence. And I gotta say, it did just say earlier in this chapter that she was 11 years old, not that long before this. So it is a bit much for me when I ran into that. Remember, she was the same age as the Thistledown children.
Right.
Described her as an 11-year-old child, and then it's like Roddy leers in at her and says, "Well, there's other things we could do to pass the time." Like,
I
yep.
didn't think about that.
I
I
mean,
mean,
if you,
either way, creepy, but now even more so.
yep. I mean, if you needed anything that could sum up the horrendous nature of Roddy, this moment in the book just really hammers it home.
Yeah, yeah.
Catti-brie's response, however, showed the steel reserve that being raised among the dwarves will give your spine, as she kneed him in the groin and fought to break free, and then suddenly found herself gripped by another set of hands and yanked free. Drizzt suddenly stood between her and Roddy and told her to leave. And then we now get a face-off between the two that I feel would make another wonderful movie moment. You know, it just spins
Totally.
around on the cameras.
Yep.
Roddy clenches Bleeder and he lets his dog loose, and then in comes Guinevere flying in and knock the dog off its course and keep it from interfering, subduing the dog pretty easily. Drizzt, he actually tries to apologize to Roddy for his misplaced rage, Roddy's misplaced rage.
Right.
But Roddy finally laid bare. He lets all of his reasons go for hating the Drow that stood before him. His dog, his ear, these things mattered more than any gold to him. His wounded pride would not allow him to let Drizzt go free. So the large man drove in with his axe, and Drizzt leapt out of the way of each crippling blow. I mean, training with Zaknafein had honed him for moments like this, and although Roddy was quick and agile for his size, Drizzt was faster. As he fell into the rhythm of the dance, he could see the feint blows coming before Roddy could even put them into motion. Roddy took blow after blow as Drizzt was convinced that he was going to use the flats of his scimitar and the hilts of the blades instead of the actual cutting edge itself. And he just kept pushing forward. Vengeance pushed him past the limit of most men that Drizzt had come into combat with, and he felt his determination begin to waver as he realized he's going to possibly have to use more than just those flats of the scimitar to stop this large man. Roddy took damage but used his mask to tackle Drizzt to the ground. Gwen came in to knock him off, but Roddy scored a hit on her flank with his axe, which enraged Drizzt. He saw that axe hit home on her flank, and he came forward with a savage flurry of blows that the man couldn't follow, let alone counter. The fire in his eyes no longer indicated compromise. Drizzt drew blood and forced the man to the ground with a scimitar on either side of his neck. Roddy screamed in defiance, and Drizzt screamed for him repeatedly to leave and be on his way. Roddy, though, maniacally forces his own neck along the blades of Drizzt's scimitars, drawing blood, screaming for Drizzt to finish it, to kill him. But Drizzt can't bring himself to kill this man whose only crime that he can see is an unwarranted hunt on Drizzt himself. So Drizzt beats him unconscious and leaves. McGristle regains consciousness several hours later with his dog standing over him. He worked through the pain and continued his hunt and suddenly finds himself standing before a small girl and the red-bearded dwarf from earlier. Bruner calmly warned Roddy that he shouldn't be touching his girl. Roddy exploded about the Drow, and Bruner was stung by the omission that Catti-brie had left out of her story when recounting how Roddy had come to put hands on her. She had gone to see the Drow and disobeyed her father's direct orders. She lashed out in defense, explaining that his teachings were that everyone should be seen for what he is and refused to let someone like Roddy take Drizzt away. Bruner was hurt, but he was also proud that she stood up for what she believed in. He just wished it wasn't him she was standing up to. In truth, Bruner himself had come looking for the Drow. He had become convinced that Drizzt had come to help him with the polar worm. The more and more he replayed those events in his head. Bruner told Roddy to get off his mountain, but Roddy defied him. He would go where he wants. So Bruner turned to Catti-brie and told her to go home along the mines. She kissed him on the helmet and mumbled under her breath, "Get him good." Sometime later, Drizzt watched the hunter and his three-legged dog make their way back to his wagon. He wasn't sure what it meant, but he didn't believe the hunter would ever truly give up on him. Drizzt looked around and fell out of place with no idea where to go next. He looked out over the view of the town with its lights coming on, and a voice made him spin around. Bruner's Climb. This place is called. So Bruner says as he comes into view, telling Drizzt to put his cat away because if it tastes as bad as dog, he doesn't want to try it. My place this is. Me being Bruner, and this being Bruner's Climb. Drizzt was tired of fighting, and he explains he's just going to leave, but the dwarf stopped him. Just a pile of rocks. I named it as me own, but does that make it so? Just a damned pile of rocks. Drizzt was confused, but Bruner continued and explained that he was confused. Nothing's what it seems. You always try to follow what you know, and then sometimes you find out that you know not what you thought you knowed. Bruner thought dog would taste good. It looked good enough, but now his belly was cursed with every move. I love when it hit that, because it's like when you first read it, you're like, wait, did Roddy's dog always have 3 legs? No, it did not. Drizzt realized Bruner had sent Roddy away on his from his trail. He tried to thank the dwarf, but Bruner wouldn't have it. He just continued speaking. He explained he never trusted humans. You never knew what they were up to until it's too late. Other folks, though, always made sense. Elves are elves, gnomes are gnomes, orcs are straight out stupid and ugly. No, he had never known any of them to be anything else, and he'd met more than a few the notches on his axe could prove. But now, this damn Drow had him confused. He'd never met one. He'd never wanted to. After all, look, Drow were bad. They're mean-hearted. Everyone who has ever told anybody about a Drow has told them that. Thought I knowed what I knowed. Had the world figured sure enough. Easy to do when you stay in your own hole. Bruner finally stopped talking and looked at Drizzt. Bruner's Climb? Call it Drizzt's Climb, and it's your home. Then you'd be kicking me out. Drizzt wanted to laugh. He wasn't sure he could, even if he wanted to. Bruner kept looking at him and said, call it whatever you want, but keep looking out for my girl. If anything happens to her, I'll hold yourself. And the rest faded away as Bruner left around the corner, and Drizzt heard the words in his mind that he longed to hear for so long. Welcome home.
Oh, man.
Right? It's such an emotional moment in the book.
It really is. It really is.
And it's funny because that little snippet of Bruner, when you get in there, it's everything I come to love about Bruner and all the other stories.
Just this grumpy old dwarf constantly lecturing from a distance as he's walking off.
Yep, I mean, nice. Threatening violence the whole way, but also just that big heart. You know, love it.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and talk about our favorite parts of these chapters in the dim light reel. The dim light reel is where we cast darkness on our favorite parts of this week, and dim light, all of our favorite characters, events, descriptions, and more. Mine I titled Mergen Devenisander has purple eyes. My
purple eyes.
So my dim light this week is the amazing ruse that Drizzt comes up with to trick Hephaestus. After Tyrannus traps the party of friars and Drizzt in the tunnel that leads to the dragon's lair, Drizzt did little to help the friars get back the way they came. The friars were yelling and screaming for help, which stopped quickly when Drizzt said that they were gonna wake up the dragon if they continued. They tried to pick a lock open to open the door, a door which was forged by dwarves, so good luck with that. And yet through it all, Drizzt just read his book of choice, A History of Local Dragons. Here, Drizzt is the DM's favorite D&D player, Jeffrey.
Lore dump!
This is a player that recognizes a situation where the lore of the world might come in handy, and then he goes on to apply it in a way to solve their problem. After reading it's amazing. It's amazing. That's exactly what all DMs want.
Meanwhile, the best thing I can do is figure out that there's a weapon I can remove from the wall and throw at people in an improvised sort of way.
Right. So after reading the Dragon Tome for a while, a light bulb goes off over Drizzt's head. Mergen Devenisander the Black Dragon of Chult, has purple eyes. How in the world could this bit of information help them? Like, that's what the friars are like.
Like,
So?
great. We're in the cave of a red dragon, Drizzt.
Well, dragons are famous. Okay, so Hephaestus would be familiar with, let's call him Merg instead of Mergen Devanasander. Merg.
Oh, see, I should have. You're a genius. Genius.
Also, Drizzt's eyes are also purple.
You know, you're right. They are.
Or lavender, I guess. But purple's like a adjacent, right?
Yeah, it's in that spectrum.
Right. So Drizzt takes in all this information and recalls the situation with his friend Clacker, the petch that was turning into that turned physically into a hook horror and was like mentally transitioning over that back in book 2. Yeah, that situation was just so horrific and sad, right? But it's nice that now that we went through the Drizzt, right? We know that Drizzt is going to pretend to be this dragon that was polymorphed. It's nice that Drizzt is able to take such a sad situation from his backstory and use it to formulate a solution to his problem now.
Across the coals one more time, like, oh,
right, I know, right? So Drizzt sneaks up on the red dragon and claims to be none other than the powerful black dragon Merg of Chult.
And you see, when you say it that way, all I can think of is Toy Story. You're like, Merg!
Right, instead of Zerg. Like, what a courageous and clever plan. Of course, this ruse only holds up for a portion of his plan, right? But isn't that how all D&D plans go? Like, that's how they always go.
Then you gotta roll.
I mean, like, Drizzt sold this scheme to Hephaestus so well that the dragon insisted on Drizzt not moving a muscle until he remembered the spell to counter this polymorph. And
he was like, come back tomorrow, but don't move.
Right, exactly.
Give me a day.
And it was like Drizzt was acting like he didn't fully expect to make it this far, right? Which is how a lot of D&D plans go.
Yep.
Where you're just kind of like...
Got the rough outline of the plan and...
It's like, now what? Because, yeah, at this point, Drizzt is starting to worry that he might actually be turned into a black dragon. I don't know that crossed his mind ever before that.
Man, what if Hephaestus is actually successful?
And, I mean, this is an aside, but would that be so terrible? Being turned into a dragon? I guess I
don't know, because, like, you know, is he that happy being a drow? Like, maybe he'd find a better home as a dragon. You know,
maybe?
Like people inside the town, like they at least put up with that red dragon because he could smelt some stuff, you know.
I mean, to be fair, Drizzt isn't really looking to be the most powerful person out there, but, you know, if that was someone's...
He did get the adventure bug, though, where all of a sudden he's like, he can see himself wanting to be, like, on heroic quests.
Right, yeah. But anyway, so Drizzt and his friends eventually make a bolt for the exit and scrape together a few gold trinkets along the way. So yeah, this had to be my dim light this week because it just reeks of a good D&D session. The characters were diving deep into the lore of the world. Well, Drizzt was, right? There was role-playing. There was role-playing through like a difficult conversation. Yeah. The conversation itself was the real test, right? Just imagine how many deception and insight checks there would have been throughout that conversation.
Oh, yeah. Like, no, that's so cool to think about it, because you just normally think about hack and slash, right?
Right, exactly. Like, it's such a fun alternative to just a plain old combat, right? Yeah. Like when, for instance, when Drizzt is like, oh, well, Black Dragon's breath is far superior to Red's, and it's just like, oh, that was a failed deception roll there. Because the Red Dragon's like, hold on a minute.
Be like, oh, is it now?
So, I just loved that whole interaction with the dragon, but like the icing on the cake was really just Drizzt coming up with that plan, and how it just felt so much like I said, just a really good D&D session. So that had
Yeah,
to
I
be
mean,
my dim light
it
this week.
Drizzt coming out kind of like a bard there, you know. Set aside
Absolutely.
his might
Yeah.
have multi-classed a little bit. No, but that was an excellent dim light. It was an excellent dim light. I like it. My dim light I have entitled, oh, what kind of, like a, not a death metal song, but one of those dark metal songs where it's called Death of Tyrannus.
Death of Tyrannus.
Turns out I got a soft spot for characters that you should probably really hate and loathe. Not sure what that reveals about me, but I choose to look at the good in all of this, and this moment shined to me because it really showcases how well Artie Salvatore writes. I mean, how he
Mm-hmm.
sets up a moment and how the payoff can hit you in ways that you just don't expect. We see Roddy looking down at the weeping friars. The whisper of their name gets the attention of Tyrannus, who gawks and rushes from his sack to join Roddy looking down on them. For once, his speed proves to be a liability, and the words are out of his mouth before he realizes what he's saying. It cannot be. The dragon. Roddy's
Uh-oh.
glare fell over Tyrannus like the shadow of a thundercloud. Like, that's the actual line he uses. I love that description.
Yep.
Like, I love how gloomy that line makes everything feel. You definitely get the feeling of dread that must have been creeping over Tyrannus as he realizes what he said out loud, that he should have actually kept locked inside to himself. Tyrannus has served a lot of cruel masters in this book. We met him in the beginning with the Barghast, then with the Great
Right?
Wolf Kerouac, right? Kerouac.
Yep.
Finally, with Roddy here. You don't really feel bad for him because you've seen him exploiting all of these companions. But
It's true.
you kind of do feel bad for him because they form this sort of parasitic relationship with their
Right.
companions, with each other, where he would use his speed and scheming to benefit the bulk and aggression of his perceived masters. Tyrannus, he just immediately tried to backtrack on his omission, but realized, Roddy actually knew the tunnels better than he did, and Roddy also knew that the way that this sprite was with locks, so he could probably guess the indiscretion. You took it on yourself to kill the drow, Roddy said calmly. Please, my master, Tyrannus replied. I did not mean. I feared for you. The drow is a devil, I say. I sent them down the dragon's tunnel. I thought that you. Forget it, Roddy growled. You did what you did, and no more about it. Now get in your sack, mite, and that we can fix what you done, if the drow's not dead. Tyrannus nodded, relieved, zipped back into the sack. Roddy scooped it up and called his dog to his side. Now, this moment sets it up so wonderfully, right? Because you can read the relief in Tyrannus, who was expecting the worst. Tyrannus is expecting Roddy to rage at him, to try and hurt him, but the calm reply actually puts Tyrannus at ease.
Right.
While we're talking about it, I'm not actually sure why Tyrannus lived in a sack,
I
right?
don't know either, right? Couldn't he
No, that's
walk?
that's the one thing that really stood out to me, because it may actually also have really added to the whole heartstring moment for me, because what kind of home is that?
Right.
I mean, Tyrannus, he's a sprite, and there's just got to be a million better ways of traveling in a sack, which is dirty, right? It's just covered in grime because McGristle is a filthy man.
Yep.
Like what Tinkerbell used to travel in a lantern. Like, there's just got to be a better way. You can picture Tyrannus lowering their head in submission, letting out a sigh of relief, and entering that sack believing that they've dodged a bullet. What a setup. I'll get the friars talking, the bounty hunter vowed, but first, Roddy whipped the sack about, slamming it into the stone wall. Master, came the sprite's muffled cry. You drow stealing! Roddy huffed and beat the sack mercilessly against the unyielding stone. Tyrannus squirmed for the first few whacks, even managed to begin a tear with his little dagger. But then the sack darkened with wetness and the sprite struggled no more. Drow stealing mutant, Roddy mumbled, tossing the gory package away. That's cold. Like, that's chilling.
Yeah, I mean it's a brutal way to go. Absolutely. I mean for any small character like that.
Ah,
Like but yeah,
I think
let's not forget that he is a bad guy,
I was
right?
gonna say, I know that Tyrannus is not a good character, right? I'm quite certain Tyrannus has probably committed a dozen acts or so that I'd understand him actually receiving a death sentence for. But to be lured into a false sense of safety, like a false
Yeah.
sense of friendship, of like security, and then to be beaten to death with no idea what's happening because you're in a sack, no way to
Right.
defend yourself. You can't even struggle out of the bag to defend yourself. Like that's the part that really got me when it's like with his little dagger, he managed to
Right.
get a little
Oh,
tear. Just like
yeah. Yep.
you can't even struggle out of the bag to defend yourself. Your life is snuffed out in a most brutal manner, and you're just dumped carelessly to the side. Like this is something out of like some twisted serial killer type movie or something, because the psyche of a character like Roddy McGristle never ceases to amaze me with the depths of its darkness.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
glad that Bruner ate his dog's leg. I'm
Oh,
glad.
absolutely.
Now, feel bad for the dog, and if R.A. Salvatore wrote that, and you know what I mean, we put it from the point of view of the dog, I feel horrible.
Right.
But I'm glad that Roddy McGristle's hurt a little bit because he's.
I I'm surprised Roddy made it out of here alive.
Let me also state that this show does not agree with eating the legs of the dogs. Just want to hurt McGristle. That's all.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's what I would have rather saw, but I mean, dogs are only as nice as their trainers, right? I mean,
Yeah. Oh.
um so yeah, back when we first thought Tyrannus was toast, when he
Right.
like was thrown off the cliff, would that have been a less would you have felt
I'd have been
better
fine
about
with
that?
that. Yep.
Right, right.
Just fine with that. Like, hey, look, it happens. You're a bad guy. But
Right.
that was just, that was a
Yeah,
lot.
there's something like you said. There's something about being drawn into a false sense of security by a friend, and then just
No, and I mean, like, again, I go back to like, to an animal and that love bond relationship you have. No,
right.
Defanus was clearly, a sprite and was conscious and could talk, right? But like Roddy was his master. They had that bond
Mm-hmm.
between them that they were trying to do whatever. So like, when he felt safe, like, oh, it's just the betraying that bond is an evil thing, man.
Yeah,
It's just
maybe
it's
that's where the
dark.
problem is. Maybe that's where the problem is.
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Oh,
wondering why he didn't just try bolting. Why didn't he just try running?
yeah.
But I
I don't know.
mean,
Because I mean,
yeah.
his whole thing is built around having to have somebody bigger than him to protect him. You know what I mean? And always believing that these bigger people were inferior to him because he's smarter and quicker, and they
But
do his dancing or his
yeah,
bidding,
there's a dragon right nearby. Tyrannus, come on,
right? You know that
go
because
make
you
friends.
sent Drizzt and the Friars.
All right.
The next theme song to Drizzt Done Right, brought to you by Drizzt and the Weeping Friar. Dun, dun, dun.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into the next part of the show, the Dungeon Delve. The Dungeon Delve is a part of the show where we link this week's reading with our favorite tabletop role playing game. All right, for my Dungeon Delve this week, I wanted to dim light the Polar Worm, aka the Remoraz. Remoraz?
Rumor
Remoraz.
has,
Rum-
rumor has.
The Remoraz can be found on page 258 of the 5e Monster Manual, if you have that handy. And when you first see the picture of this giant winged blue centipede, I mean, my first reaction was, oh, this thing is an ice creature of some kind. But you, dear listener, would be incorrect just as I was, if that's what you thought. These creatures are described as Arctic predators, but what's actually interesting about them is that they are hot to the touch. They're not ice creatures. They're fire creatures essentially. I mean, they're hot to the touch so much so that if you in 5e, if you make an attack within 5 feet of the Remoraz, you take 3d6 fire damage. That's how hot these things are.
Wow, that's a
And
lot. If
yeah,
you're a lower level character, good luck.
and I mean, that's how this creature is able to survive in the coldest environments. They're not warm-blooded, Jeffrey. They are hot-blooded. They are steaming lava hot-blooded creatures. And for this reason, they actually cannot survive in warmer climates. Um, that seemed so backwards to me the first time I read this a few weeks ago when I had you guys fight one. I don't know if you remember that or not, but
I was, wait a minute, in my
uh,
head, I'm like, what did I fight that hit
we'll
me
talk
when
about
I,
it. We'll talk about it
son
at
of a
the end of this.
gun?
So a Remoraz again, is an Arctic predator. They lie in wait under the ice and snow for their favorite treats, elk and polar bears. Which, I
Anything
mean,
that thinks a polar bear is a treat is horrifying.
absolutely, right? Like that. Ugh. When they sense the vibrations of their prey above, they emerge and gobble them up like a shy hulud from Dune.
Excellent. I
Being
love it.
being huge monstrosities. I guess they are a little smaller than a sandworm though. Huge is what is it?
I
One block is medium,
love
two
that your
by two
typo in
is
the script says
large.
being hug monstrosities because they do kind of hug you though, right to death, right? Nom 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 nom.
Huggy with his mouth. What is it? Large is 2 by 2. Is huge 3 by 3? I forget. I forget the exact rules, but it's on the DM screen. So if you have one of those, check it out. So
Would
they
be
are
50, a huge creature is usually between 15 to 32 feet tall, 15 by 15 in space. So you'd be 3 by 3.
3 by 3. Yeah. Okay. So I guess they are a little smaller than those sandworms. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the stat block of this Remoraz. They have a challenge rating of 11, so yeah, they're pretty tough. They have an AC of 17 and an average of 195 HP. So you're not taking this thing on with a few level 1 characters. But, and this is an important note here, they only have a speed of 30 feet per turn. So they're not particularly fast. Okay? They are immune to cold and fire damage. They have dark vision and tremor sense, both out to 60 feet. And then they have 2 actions that they can do, aside from normal, like dash, things like that. Can monsters dash? I always assumed they could because players could.
I think so. Makes sense.
Yeah. I've had monsters dash before, so I hope they can. So they have 2 possible actions. The first one is bite. Bite does an average of 40 piercing damage plus an average of 10 fire damage. That 10 fire damage is essentially the 3d6 from being so close to it.
Great.
On top of that, on a successful hit, the creature, the target, is automatically grappled.
With its mouth.
With its mouth. You're caught in its mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to escape that grapple, there's a DC 17 to escape, whether you do strength or dexterity.
Excellent.
So that's one possible action. The second possible action is swallow. If a creature fails to escape the grapple from the previous bite, the Remoraz can then attempt to bite again, and on a successful second bite, the target is swallowed and is no longer grappled. So, instead of being grappled, the target is now blinded, restrained. They take an average of 21 acid damage each turn, but hey, at least they have total cover from all other attacks. So is that it? Once you're swallowed, you're done, right? Nope, not quite. Turns out, if the Remoraz takes... And what I mean by you're done, you're dead, right? But no, there is a way out, okay? They set up rules so that if the Remoraz takes 30 damage from the inside, if you can manage to deal 30 damage from inside the Remoraz, then the Remoraz needs to succeed on a DC 15 con save, or else it regurgitates all swallowed creatures. That's so gross. That is so gross.
Oh, yeah. You're coming out icky.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you're gonna, I mean, rules as written, it's not there, but I feel like you would continue to take acid damage until you get washed off.
You would think
But-
so, right? Oh.
Also, any creature that is inside a dead Remoraz can crawl out with just 15 feet of movement. So, like I said, Jeffrey, I rolled this creature on a random roll table in our last campaign.
Yep.
You guys fought the Well, do you remember? Do you remember what
Yeah, this
happened?
is the one that I hit with the guiding bolt and the dangly ball in the back of its throat going for broke, wasn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was going to try to swallow me. And I was like, the heck with it. I'm just going to go ahead
Right.
and throw my last guiding bolt or whatever right at it. And you were like, where do you hit it? I was like, right in the dangly ball. It's the uvula for those of you. I
The
don't know if it
uvula.
holds
Yep.
true in monsters, but in people. And I was like, well,
Uh,
if I'm going to get swallowed, I'm going to reach out with my magic and shoot this thing in the dangly ball.
and from there, I seem to remember being like, "So what do you guys plan on doing here?" Like, you all get the sense that this thing is very strong and very dangerous, and you're like, uh, well, the group in general is like, "I think we should run," which is what you guys ultimately did, from what I remember, because 30 feet of movement, not very much. I think you
No, I
guys
think I
managed
ended
to
up killing the
escape.
thing by accident with that guiding bolt.
Oh,
Because
did
those,
you?
when you lock that off at a higher level, come out with a ton of ton of damage.
Okay, all right. I'm
Yeah.
mistaken then.
So I
Yeah,
think it
I
was a
must be
coup de
mistaken.
grace moment where I hit and killed. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember what level we were at?
Minimum of 6. Minimum.
Yeah, I think we got to at least 6 or 7. Yeah. Anyway, that is my dungeon delve on the Remoraz. Jeffrey, what do you have for us this week?
Well, I decided to go with the Weeping Fr. No, I didn't. No, I went with the Red
Um,
Dragon. I went with the
I
Red
was a
Dragon.
I was about to go with the Weeping Friars.
I know I found it hilarious because you had told me that. And I was like, oh man, I thought about going with the Weeping Friars, but then I was like, nah, you know what? Like, I'll do the Polar Worm because you're doing the Weeping Friars. And I was like, well, I can't do the Polar Worm. You got to do the Red Dragon, right?
You got to
And
do the
then
Red
you
Dragon.
you also swapped off from the Polar Worm and went to the Weeping
Or
Friars with
vice
the Polar
versa,
Worm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because I was doing the Weeping Friars because I was like, wow, that sounds so
it
interesting.
does.
And I
Like,
look,
what kind of people are they?
yeah, and I look it up, and it's like the only thing that Forgotten Realms wiki had was like, hey, they were in Sojourn, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
there's nothing
I
else.
read that.
There's nothing.
So mine is Red Dragon. 3 books in, and we finally get a dragon, so I just couldn't let this trilogy go without taking a look at an actual dragon. When you go to dndbeyond.com, the description reads, the odor of sulfur and pumice surrounds a red dragon, whose swept-back horns and spinal frill define its silhouette. Its beak snout vents smoke at all times, and its eyes dance with flame when it is angry. Can I get a pause here? I mean, just think about that, right? Just close your eyes and picture that.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, look, a dragon is perhaps the most iconic character that you're going to come across in D&D. I mean, it's right there in the title, right?
It's
You're
right there,
going to
Jeffrey.
go into dungeons and you just might find a dragon.
Not might. You're going to find a dragon.
If you keep going into dungeons. Yes,
All
eventually.
dungeons lead to dragons.
And if you do find a dragon, perhaps someone will actually get to tell a story about finding a really cool shield one day that you amid the treasure of the hoard that the dragon lives in. They are, without a doubt, one of the fiercest enemies that you will come into contact with, and I feel like they were the kind of creatures that got tattoos. They'd have one that would say TPK on their knuckles, or something like that, because, a dragon may very well kill your entire party, even if your DM isn't actively trying to.
Yeah.
Breaking down the stat block of a written adult red dragon, they're considered huge in size, right? Did we just determine that that's 15 by 15, the 3 squares? Is that what you,
Right. Which seems small. I'll look it up. Keep going.
which they are considered huge, and they generally have a chaotic evil alignment. They have an armor class of 19. It's natural armor, and their hit points is 19d12 plus 133 for an average of about 256. They have a speed of 40 feet. They can climb at 40 feet, or they can fly at around 80 feet per round. They get a +8 to strength, +7 to constitution, +3 to intelligence, +1 to wisdom, and +5 to charisma. Okay, now, remember those numbers? Nope, hang on
Got it.
tight because I'm going to change them all around right now because when it comes to saving throws, well, the dragon gets a +6 to dex, a +13 to con, a +7 to wisdom, and a +11 to charisma. Evidently,
Wow.
dragons are extremely charming. Skills get a buff of plus 13 to perception and plus 6 to stealth. And I actually think this makes a lot of sense because you're not just going to easily walk in and take treasure away from a dragon, right? I mean, if you remember Smaug from Lord of the Rings, a red dragon is very crafty and pretty alert.
Yeah.
We read that Hephaestus saw the Weeping Friars even though he was keeping his eyes closed mostly while melting solid rock because he wanted to use his perception to see how impressed Drizzt was by the flame. And he actually caught them sneaking by.
Yep. So, yeah, looking at the scale here, small, medium, large, then huge. Huge would be 3 by 3, 15 by 15. Which seems small, but I guess dragons can be in different sizes. You can hover
I mean, but
that.
maybe that's just the average dragon, right?
Yeah.
They're average red.
The average
So they
adult
can,
red.
they are immune to fire, which makes sense because if they weren't, that'd be rough.
That would be. You're sneezing
senses.
out everything that's like.
If you were weak to what you're blowing out of your mouth, you're gonna have a hard time. So, for senses, dragons have blind sight up to 60 feet, dark vision up to 120 feet, and with that buff to perception, their passive perception sits at a wonderful 23.
Wow.
So again, when they try to sneak by and grab the treasure, that man, you had better roll great because that dragon's probably gonna notice you're in its room.
Leave the barbarian behind.
And the paladin because he's got plate mail.
Yep.
Matter of fact, let them walk together, right? So the dragons can speak Common and Draconic, and they have a proficiency bonus of a +6. According to this stat block, it's a challenge rating of 17, and it's worth 18,000 experience. Those were just the stats of the Red Dragon. Let's get into the mechanics and see how it plays, right? They have a legendary resistance, so 3 times a day, if the dragon fails on one of its saving throws, it can actually succeed. It can actually choose just to succeed.
Right, and like, how many times is it actually gonna fail a saving throw with stats like that?
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like, it's pretty darn helpful when you consider that they already have a bunch of high skill checks to begin with. And a
Right.
party is going to throw all kinds of neat tricks at the dragon, and then 3 times a day, when those tricks slip by all of its buff saves, it could just be like, nope, not going to happen.
Nah,
Sorry.
not today. Not today.
Dragons also have a multi-attack, right? So they can use its frightful presence, which then makes 3 attacks, 1 bite and 2 with its claws.
1 bite, 2 claws. Wow.
So
Okay.
the bite attack is a +14 to hit. It's got a reach of 10 feet, 1 target. It does 2d10 plus 8 piercing damage for an average of 19.
That's not too
It also
bad.
then gets a claw attack with a +14 to hit. It's a reach of 5 feet, 1 target. It does 2d6 plus 8 for an average of 15 slashing damage. Then you can also do a tail attack, right? It's a +14 to hit. It's a reach of 15 feet. 1 target, does 2d8 plus 8 bludgeoning damage for an average of 17. So for your quick math on that triple attack, you'd get the 14 with the plus to hit, which is pretty gnarly. So they're probably going to land most of them, if not all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And when they do, you're going to get hit with an average of, 49 per
Yeah.
round.
Yeah, that hurts. Okay, so individually, it's like, that's not too bad depending on your level, but it's like, oh no, you
Right.
put them all together. Yeah, that's gonna hurt.
Now, and I think that the way it was described for these 3 attacks, to be able to use them like that, you had to use Frightful Presence.
Okay.
And so Frightful Presence is described as each creature of the dragon's choice that is within 120 feet of the dragon and aware of it must succeed on a DC Wisdom 19 saving throw or become frightened for a minute.
Oh, jeez.
A creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. If the saving throw is successful or the effect ends, for the creature is immune then to that effect for the next 24 hours.
Oh, well, that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah, so you got to get through it.
Yeah. Which I feel like would be pretty realistic as far as like approaching a situation that is like that terrifying. There's that initial fear, and then like just like getting over that.
Yeah, like how much worse is it going to get?
Yeah, exactly.
The dragon can also use fire breath. So because a red dragon that doesn't breathe fire would just feel a little odd, right? Now the dragon exhales fire in a 60-foot cone. each creature in that area must make a DC 21 dex save,
Oh
taking
my
18d6 fire damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. So an average of 63 HP on a fail, or 31 on a save if you round down. Now the breath says it
Jeez.
recharges on a 5 or 6. That means you roll every turn, right? To see
Right.
your
Each turn
six-sided
you
die.
roll.
So it's got a 33% chance of reloading that fire and doing it again. Great. An adult red dragon also gets legendary actions. It can take 3 of them per round, and they're used at the end of another creature's turn. You can only use one at a
Right.
time. I remember you attacking us with something that had legendary actions.
That's right. That's right. I forgot
They
about that.
replenish at the start of each turn for the dragon. So each turn the dragon comes around, it gets its legendary actions back. These could be detect, the dragon makes a wisdom or a perception check, tail attack, the dragon makes a tail attack, or wing attack. This costs 2 actions, and each creature within 10 feet of the dragon must succeed on a DC 22 dex save or take 2d6 plus 8 bludgeoning damage, get knocked prone. The dragon can then fly up to half its flying speed. So, like, I mean, it could just rush. That would be scary. You're prone and it's charging. Coming into combat and surviving any dragon is a feat. Coming into contact with this red dragon sounds like an easy way to re-roll your character. But when you take all of this into account and try to fit Hephaestus into the mold of a D&D villain, it's important to remember Hephaestus is not just any normal dragon. They survive for so long that they likely have unique properties as a villain, and it'd be neat to see how you guys at home would actually homebrew the stats for Hephaestus to make it just a little different, right? I think
That'd
you'd
be
at
really
least have
cool.
to start out maybe by making the fire breath an extra 5d6 in there, right? Because that would be a truly sizable enough that this red dragon's breath would be a little more awe-inspiring. What
Right.
else?
Oh, absolutely.
What else would you guys all have in mind? Look, Justin, what pops into your head? Anything at
Well,
all?
well,
Put you
yeah.
on the spot real quick.
I mean, just first thing I'm thinking of is you looked up the stats for an adult red dragon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he would be an ancient red dragon
Ooh.
because that would be
Yeah, he
even
would almost have to be because they don't even know his name, right? Ooh.
right. Yeah, like his name was lost.
I like that.
You know, so I mean that would definitely add to his fire breath. I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but
Right.
yeah,
I
that's
like that.
that's my first thing that comes to mind.
Look, out for you at home, any of you, we'd love to hear any stories that you have about dragons that you've come across in your campaigns. I mean, look, did you fight it? Did you reason with it? Did you let it win? Were you the DM? Did it kill your whole party? Look, send us an email. Drop a line to a Drizzt Cord. Come on in. Let us know. Right, when I said let it win, I think of spoiler alert to anybody who's playing. Sorry. The Tiamat, Mother of Dragons module.
Yeah, Tiamat. Yeah.
You meet a blue dragon.
Okay.
And the blue dragon is really lazy and doesn't really want to fight. So you could just let the dragon win and be like, okay, you're great. It's like, I'm out. Deuces. It's like, what? Because, like, it's too lazy to want to continue. So it's like, whatever. I don't have time for this. So you can literally just, like, kind of, just, like, win by not fighting the dragon.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. Well, that is amazing how, like, so often, at least in my experience, players will just like, well, we're playing D&D. We just saw this bad guy. Let's go kill him. And it's like, I mean, you just did
that
to him.
We just did that with the mammoth, and then you were like, I didn't know what to do with you killing it because you're not supposed to fight it.
It's like the mammoth came out and was like, oh, you're causing all these problems. This is all your fault. And it's like, the mammoth talked to you. Let's kill it. And it's like, the mammoth is talking.
In our defense, there was a guy in our party named Bear Killer, and a mammoth is like a very large bear with tusks.
All right, awesome. Well, that's going to do it for this episode, part 5 of book 3, 3 books down.
What?
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember that if you like our show, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating. Also, make sure you are getting the most out of this podcast. Pick up a copy of the book and read along with us. Hey, and if you don't have time to read, consider the audiobook. That way you can listen to it during your commute while you're at at the gym, or wherever you are. When you've read up on the next part, shoot us an email at drizztdoneright@gmail.com or log on to our Discord to join in on the discussion there. Remember, we would love to hear from
you. Our show is at an end with this episode, but the ways that you can help this show are endless. We actually have a link that literally says support this podcast. You can find that link on this episode description, and all donations are appreciated. We're not going to use your donations to fund a vacation to Bali. All of the proceeds go toward improving this show for you and all of your fellow denizens of the Underdark. And now that we've come to an end, it's always awkward to say goodbye. So instead, say farewell, play fair, be well.